This is the point where I have to start getting into the DLC missions, as they do actually factor into the story.
A lot of them slot themselves cleanly in between the main story mission, or flip things to just stuff we didn't see, and can add some details to the story that smooth out the plot and the various character interactions or bits of their backstory. The first one actually being a bit of what Toby was doing before he joined up with the crew in first finding the Jupiter Empire active again and helping the Gamelas, as he worked to save one of the few surviving Federation mobile suit units. Though he failed, the soldier asked him to get to Mars and help the people there, which allowed Toby to hook up with the Yamato gang, even though the events of the Crossbone series are primarily set around Jupiter.
But more on point, there's the issue of Ryoma that needs to be ironed out, as Ryoma is one of those characters that doesn't respect authority. At all. He's kind of an anarchist, or wild horse, in that you don't break him to bring him into line, as you literally can't. But you can reason with him, and if you get him to respect you, then he's more than willing to listen. You just gotta make sure you respect him in kind. Call him out when he's being an ass, and make sure you show that you're not gonna stab him in the back, as the guy is not unreasonable. He just has major trust issues due to his teammates and close friends being, well, assholes. They did frame him for murder.
So for Kodai, who is acting as the coordinator for the mobile forces, it's an uphill battle as he himself is fresh out of the academy, thus doesn't really have the experience to lead people as others might. But by their personality types, he's arguably the closest to be able to make a breakthrough with him. Thus, the mobile unit makes a return trip to Pluto to see if they can't get any more info out of the destroyed base, only to find another group of invaders have staked the place out. Ryoma rushes forward to confront them, saying he doesn't need anybody because he's sick of losing people he cares for, only to get ambushed and have Kodai need to pull his ass out of the fire. And as I said, Ryoma is not an unreasonable idiot asshole, and can recognize when he did wrong by someone or screwed up. So when Kodai almost dies because he rushed in, he is the first to acknowledge that he screwed up. Kodai having his back reminded him of better times when he could trust people, could depend on people to keep him from going a bit too far and putting others in danger on accident, but with how Saotome and Hayato stabbed him in the back, he just forgot what it felt like for someone to actually value him as more than a tool. That was what his actions were rebelling against. Again, show you respect him, make an effort to show you value him, not his role, and you have his respect.
Though that will not stop him from acting like a tsundere, because he is just one giant fluffy sideburn sporting soon.
Over with the Gamelans, their upper echelons are concerned over how the Yamato has near single-handedly taken out their forces and turned the tide in the Sol system. But the problem is the main commanders are all basically yes-men to their supreme commander, Emperor Dessler, who serves as the big bad of the first story arc of Yamato. He thinks them an inconsequential threat in the face of their vast armadas, and their otherwise successful measures to subjugate and assimilate the populace of the rest of the galaxy.
Oh, irony!
So they decide to send their specialist, the Space Wolf, out after them.
Wait, they have Mega Beast Investigator Juspion on their side?
The Yamato finally leaves the orbit of the Sol system, passing beyond the heliopause point that blocks off standard communications from them, leaving those with family one last chance to talk to them. The rest of the crew take off to party for their successes, which just leaves the new recruits without families a chance to bond. Ryoma and Tetsuya spending the party off with Soji and Chitose, Soji getting the opportunity to reveal that his parents and sisters died in the Gamelas' first wave, followed by the rest of his friends in one of the Fed's earlier operations, the one that lost them control of Pluto. And worse, they were just a decoy so Eurisha could come to Earth a year before, while Yuki and Kodai take over repair of Yamato's hull so others could take the time to relax. Neither, as said before, having anyone aboard or abroad, thus allowing the pair to bond through their common solitude. After the party, the ship jumps farther into deep space, coming out sooner than expected thanks to interference from a Gamelan fleet, and worse, too close to a sun for any comfort, them having used the sun to disrupt all FTL travel in its vicinity.
Star Wars calls them interdiction fields. A certain live-action movie could have probably used them.
And worse, the ships are testing a chemical weapon that absorbs energy to grow and assimilate infinitely.
Oh great, the Gamelans are trying to weaponize the invaders. That will end well for everyone.
The only way out of this is to literally charge through the fleet before their weapons can deal enough damage, or the bioweapon can absorb enough energy from the sun to become destructive. Nine, confused by the mad scramble everyone is in, as she doesn't quite understand the contradictions in persona people can have between their presented emotional states amidst this. Their life is on the line in every battle, so why is it them fighting above a sun is different?
Well, for one, falling into a planet's atmosphere in a mobile suit is survivable. Unless you're like Gao Gaiga or using a ship designed to dive into suns to recharge its power supply, like the Destiny and Stargate universe, a series which is terrible by the way, there aren't exactly a lot of things that can survive contact with the sun. Hell, one of the preferred ways to deal with immortal beings is to trap them in a sun.
The heat bleeding through the shields, however, is too much for Okita, who collapses. But fortunately for them, the Gamlas' FTL disruption field has drawn something else from extra-dimensional space down. Specifically, a competitor for the single most powerful Gundam in the entire Gundam franchise, the GNT-0000 Gundam 00 Quantao, piloted by celestial being Gundam Meister Setsuna F-Sei, from the series Gundam 00.
Also known as the prime candidate of being the single best Gundam series yet made, one with the fewest narrative and character problems, excellent animation, self-aware critique of not only UGC Gundam but its own story in its second season, and a series that actually progressed and pushed forward the franchise without circle-jerking its way around reduxing elements of Universal Century stuff. And to date, one of fewer than 5 Gundam series to actually make me cry when someone actually died, as it actually understood how to make someone that emotionally invested in the characters. For those who have seen the series, you know which deaths I am talking about.
You, people down there, are you satisfied with the way the world is? As for me, I hate it.
Lock on! Lock on! Lock on! Lock on!
No! Don't tell me lock-ons!
Lock on! Lock on!
Like, I have a soft spot for the series that aired on Toonami like Gundam Wing. I am a complete sucker for the mecha designs of Gundam Seed. But you want realistic depictions of politics, the complexities of actually trying to advance humanity to a peaceful state from one of conflicting warfare, addresses the different barriers between people, how to get people to talk to one another with complex issues dividing them, what people can become due to the tragedies of war, and successfully pulling the conspiracy gambit over taking over the world and turning it into an authoritarian nation state by manipulating someone else's carefully plotted plans before having to have the protagonist have a long, hard fight to actually dismantle it with low resources and allies? Yeah, it is that damn good. And yet, you see purists bash the series for all the things that make it good, and the fact the movie actually had the second appearance of aliens in the franchise. The first, of course, being the corpse of the space whale in Gundam Seed. Why does a sect of the Gundam fanbase really not like the idea of humanity encountering aliens? It really is not that uncommon in Super Robot series. Hell, no one seemed to have problems when both the Build Fighters and Build Divers had their cast encounter them, and no one blinks when the Super Robot Wars game does it with them.
With Setsuna is his fellow Gundam Meister Tierra Erde in the Gundam Raphael, and they are from a different parallel universe than the one Ryoma and Tetsuya are from. One peaceful enough that fellow Celestial Being members and engineers the Vashti family were actually able to finish Setsuna's 00 Quantao early, allowing them the time to test more of its systems, including its own quantum jump system that allows the unit full instantaneous faster-than-light travel.
That system is an outgrowth of the quantization ability its predecessor unit, the Gundam 00 Riser, was revealed to possess in its series, which basically allowed it to jump to different points within lines of sight to avoid attacks thanks to the quantum communication and computation abilities put forth in that series resultant from the applied technology around their Gundam's chief power source, the GN drives, and the GN particles they produce, which operate through the breakdown of baryonic matter stabilized in such a way that the drives are virtually limitless energy sources.
And as the Yamato's crew are actually willing to talk and not attack them outright from the start with their unusual appearance, oh irony concerning the Yamato backstory, Setsuna and Tierra decide to help us out, which is where we get something kind of funny with the Quantao. See, in the movie where it premiered, Awakening the Trailblazer,
also known as the best Gundam movie yet made. I mean, it's not got a lot of competition for that, since every compilation movie Sunrise has ever made is terrible in comparison to their normal series. At best, its best competition might be the upcoming Gundam Seed movie.
Anyways, Quantao's debut did not have it do much of anything at all due to the framing of events in the film, leaving it to be an 11th hour reveal super machine. Thus, here in the Super Robot Wars franchise, technically this machine premiering in Super Robot Wars Z3, this is actually the first place we ever get to see many of the things it was supposed to be able to do between its GN Sword 5, its sword bits, and its remodeled twin drive system.
そこかワンダムで行くぞこれまでに戦った人型兵器とは違うというのか
Hell, I actually appreciate the design of this thing so much, I kitbashed the original Quantao I got in, 2011 with the more recent release of the Quantao Full Saber to create what I call the O's Gundam, simply because I wanted this thing to have the aesthetic symmetry the O Riser features. And this thing is sword bits for days. I'm actually planning to upgrade it further and submit it to a custom model contest in the future. I'm trying to see if I can't get a 7 sword limb going for it. We'll see.
Regardless, thanks to the Gundam Meister's assistance, the Yamato crew is able to escape from the Gauntlet's trap by diving straight through a coronal mass ejection. The Gundam Meisters get updated on the situation here, as baffled that their jump test sent them completely over the rainbow, with it likewise serving as a caution for the Yamato crew that a miscalculated jump could lead them beyond the space between spaces with no way back, just as Setsuna and Tieria are for the time being. However, there's something else going on here, as it wasn't just the Gumlon's activities that dragged them here. Something else planned just this event. The crew gets to assimilating the Gundam Meisters into their roster, the other Gundam pilots musing with them the commonality of the name, with Tieria actually expressing the best cohesive description of the Gundam franchise I have ever heard. They're not just mobile suits, they feed off people's thoughts and can change the world with their overwhelming power.
Well, except in the Universal Century timeline where they act more as enforcing the status quo and are just an experimental unit, but any EU timeline Gundam series is more true of them.
But the Yamato has another failure in its jump system. As they transition to warp travel this time, the system shudders as they gate through, and end up in the dimensional space between spaces.
The void, where all your loose change goes after falling between the couch cushions. Where your missing socks go to after your dryer eats them. The realm by which angry and violent narcissists in anime draw blood weapons of excessive retribution from. And the rift the Dragon Lolly in a fanservice anime series is desperately trying to return to. It's apparently really quiet there.
And amusingly, a Gamelon ship is also here. The ship's commander, Lang, sending over ensign melded deeds to negotiate a cooperative effort to save both crews. After all, neither of them has to die here if they don't have to, right?
Yet Melda, a character original to the 2199 version, and thus another reason why it is a superior cut of the story to the original, is part of the moderate Gamillion faction, who opposes the strong-arm tactics of the Dessler Party. In fact, many of those snippets showing the Gamillion side, they are original to 2199, trying to show both sides in this conflict to actually give dimension to their enemy faction. Not humanize per se, since they are aliens with a different culture than us, but show nuance in that not everyone out there is in lockstep with the enforced brutality and racial caste nationalism that drives Dessler's followers.
And thanks to Setsuna's recent evolution into an innovator, basically the 00 Gundam version of a new type with them bearing empathic abilities, he helps the crew approach Melda's claims with an open mind, especially her assertions that Earth started this war. It leads to a follow-up question from Tobia about whether Setsuna would qualify as a new type. What's a new type, you might be asking? As the game describes, they're people who can understand each other without uttering a single word.
Can anyone name any new type in the Universal Century timeline that actually did that? I have seen every Gundam series made, and I cannot remember a single time where that actually happened. Usually new type psychic powers are used as just another means by which to argue two people's viewpoints without ever bothering to actually understand the other person, where they're coming from, and the reasons why they believe they're doing what they are. The times when someone actually talks another down from their actions, like, say, Shiro Amada in my favorite Gundam series, the 8th MS Team, they're not using new type psychic powers. They're using the empathy any normal human being is supposed to have. Like, I am sorry to UC fans for the constant thrashing I'm giving it, but from a franchise perspective, new type abilities are pretty worthless in regards to getting people to actually communicate, despite them being the only reason why they narratively exist. Which makes them
useless ass psychic powers!
Anyways, Soji and Chitose talk. Soji wanted to learn more about the Vangre, but Chitose is as stumped as him. The installation she worked at didn't build it. But Soji, flirting badly with Chitose, gets Nine to ask a question she never really learns an answer to, which serves as the primary byline through her entire character arc. As that's honestly a question Soji can't answer, as he really doesn't know himself. Hell, at best he's choosing Chitose as he's starting to feel as close to her as he did his youngest sister, who, if she were still alive, would have been about 13 now. And because of her death, he can't help but feel that all girls younger than him should be protected as if they were his sister, as he just can't let that go. Anyways, the plan to rescue themselves from the dimension space gets underway, with the plan being for the Yamato to fire the wave motion gun to open a Terran subspace, and while the Yamato's core is recharging, Lang's ship will tow them out. Problem is, they're not the only ones in this dimension space. And as they engage forces that have appeared here, a mutiny breaks out on Lang's ship, causing them to break the tow cables in order to strand us here. Our mobile units take care of the attacking force, with Melda joining in to help as she was still aboard the Yamato at the time, her only deploying after she has it out with Akira over Akira's own losses to the Gamelan's bombardments. As the battle wraps up though, Melda's commander is able to retake control from the mutineers and return to finish the job of towing the Yamato as intended. However, once they return to normal space, it turns out the mutineers managed to get out a signal to the Gamelan fleet in the region, meaning they just got led into a trap, with Lang's ship going down in the initial bombardment, stranding Melda with the Yamato, as the enemies from the subspace rift emerge in reality, causing a massive spatial disruption that sends them all beyond the rift.
Huh. Well, that was a short game.
Actually, no. This time, it's the crew that gets isekai'd. Soji and Chitose ending up back on Earth, in the AD timeline Tieri and Setsuna came from, both of them drinking in the sight of blue seas and the clear sky. And the week they're stuck there without any contact by anyone makes them both question whether they're abandoning their home by not trying to get back to saving their own Earth. I mean, this timeline seems to have done pretty well for itself from its backstory, right?
Well, yes and no. See, the AD dimension, for the most part, is actually in a time of peace after most of the major conflicts in the world have been resolved, with a few lingering issues left over. If they'd been here a few years before, though, it'd have been a lot different.
As the AD dimension, in the past 3 years, has had 2 open wars over racial tensions against genetically augmented humans escalated by both government-backed terrorists on independent actions, and then their victims that lost their families due to the government's racist policies and attacks going too far and getting what they viewed as justice, but was actually nothing but petty revenge. 3 different assaults by aliens, one of which were from humans that were forcibly expelled from the Earth sphere in years past because they rebelled against the world government. Then when they left for Jupiter, they found precursor alien technology on Mars, the second from a group of cyborgs that rebelled against their creator, and the third from a faction of aliens trying to hunt down other aliens that settled and interbred with humans. And finally, on top of all that, a crap ton of armed interventions by Celestial Being that actually led to feuding in the governments as a traitor to the Celestial Being organization gave out their technology in order to build his own faction within it that would have allowed him to take over the world.
Of course!
Or, for those not familiar with those series, that is a very abridged recap version of the plots of Gundam Seed and its sequel Gundam Seed Destiny, Gundam 00, Martian's successor Nadesico, Zambot 3, and Daitarn 3. The Zambot and Daitarn series being recurring staples of Super Robot Wars, as they are series made by Toshiyuki Tomino before he made Mobile Suit Gundam, and are actually responsible for his Kill 'Em All Tomino nickname. Those two shows have actually had very odd impacts to the stories of previous games, such as in Super Robot Wars Z2, where Daitarn's protagonist, Banjo Haran, managed to save Code Geass's Shirley Frenette from death, and in doing so, entirely derails Lelouch V. Britannia's self-destructive spiral that would have caused him to be influenced to martyr himself by Suzaku in the Zero Requiem plan. Again, there is a reason why people wanted Asian English releases of the Z games, and exposes in it a huge narrative snarl that helps make the Code Geass movie continuity god-awful. However, Zambot and Daitarn 3 have zero role or influence in this story. Why are they here?
Now, the reason why things here are at peace is most of these series actually had proper conclusions for their stories, where the sources of antagonism were addressed and derailed. Peace caused by the sins of the governments, for the most part, exposed and taken out of power. The secret organizations, most of them, that incite antagonists behind the scenes demolished, and the victims raging against what was done to them forced to confront the reality that they were becoming the very monsters they were trying to kill, and in turn creating more victims that were like themselves. Peace was achieved by moving the active causes of oppression and war, and forcing people to actually acknowledge their failings and talk out their issues, and come to terms with one another without falsehoods, misconceptions, and the sources of conflict interfering.
You know, beyond just object psychopathy, sociopathy, and terminal selfishness. Because no amount of talking is going to stop monsters who get satisfaction from others' pain from being those said monsters.
Sucker! No, but
It looks like you lose.
How dare you mock me!
No! Maru, Robbie is fire!
Again, why I like the AU Gundam timelines over the Universal Century series is they actually address and fight against the root causes of their wars. In Gundam Wing, it's the aristocracy of the ruling class turning war into a game. Thus, the way to stop it is to make everyone sick of the game through the Winter War that was Wing's end conflict. In G Gundam, it's the fact that the governments are too focused on their obsession towards maintaining control and power through the Gundam fight that they ignore the suffering of the citizens they are charged with caring about and the condition of the world they live in. In Turn A Gundam, it's about people not learning from their black history, thus are damning themselves by risking repeating it. That is literally the theme of that story. And in Gundam Seed and its sequels, it's about systematic racism and oppression causing outbreaks and violence, and in turn, the disproportionate response to the sins of such violence, turning victims into the monsters just as bad as the racists who risk continuing the cycle long after the source of their pain is gone. And the grand majority of the stories in the AD dimension had their conflicts resolved without the need of useless-ass psychic powers.
But at the moment, Soji and Chitose legitimately do not know what to do, as a bunch of giant robots start attacking the city. Specifically, the corporations of Senpujin Heavy Industries.
Oh no, who could possibly come to their rescue? Well, about that. Those series I listed off, they're not the only ones part of this timeline.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to Maito Senpuji, leader of the Brave Express Corps, and his battle partner, the transforming AI robot train, Gain, who together quickly bum-rush these rogue robots and their pilots. And seeing their brave resolve to fight forces much larger than them, reawakens something in Soji, returning his own will to find their missing crew and save his own Earth. Which is exactly where this sassy lost child dressed as a gothic Lolita enters the picture.
Oh, and yes, that is 9 in human, or well, gynoid, form.
She returns the Vanguard to Soji, and they back up Maito in mopping up the units, before Maito has to retreat as the police come by. as apparently it's illegal on their Earth to operate a robot without a license.
Wow, I can only imagine the prerequisites that would demand. Probably require a Class S license, whose instruction is more strenuous than a CDL. I mean, it's not like you can just fall into a robot and be good at it, even though the grand majority of Gundam protagonists actually are like that.
However, as Maito's president of the Senpujin concerned despite his young age, his parents were murdered and he was forced to take over, he helped Soji out of being arrested in thanks for his help, inviting him over to his company, and additionally offering to help him out. After all, Maito's the richest man in the world. Why not use that money to help people?
Now you're probably asking why he's the richest man in the world in a setting that has Gundams running around, and it's actually quite simple. For you see, his family's from a long line of rail barons. And even in the future, people need public mass transportation. Not everyone has flying cars after all. Logically, since trains move everything, and due to the setting of Gundam de Below literally connecting every country on the planet through their solar power system, well, someone has to invest in that. With the events of Gundam Seed having the Space Self-Defense Force ZAFT seeding the planet with a technology called N-Jammers that stops all unshielded nuclear reactions, well, it obviously forced everyone to rely on the solar power generation network to avoid the energy resource depletion that made the world reliant entirely on electrical power. And means of transport that can most heavily take advantage of that power is trains. See how well the story integration works here?
Their engineering head Hamada also wants to take some time to look over the Vangray as alternate universe tech. That's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But the robots from yesterday attack again, the units being the creations of Dr. Wolfgang, an angry scientist that commits grand larceny to finance his own engineering projects. Soji covers Maito as he saves a girl named Sally caught in the crossfire, and after she's safe, well, more enemy forces show up, with them being more of Maito's antagonists, who are all complete dorks. Such as Mifune, a not-a-real samurai that wants to shove Japan back to their old days. But since there are so many enemies here, it is finally to show the world Maito and Gain's fusion of man and machine.
Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to the second of the Brave series to be made part of the Super Robot Wars franchise. The Brave Express, Might Gain.
その通り銀の翼に望みを乗せて灯せ平和の青信号勇者特急マイトガイ帝国通りにただいま到着
Now, for fans of my show, I actually did a short episode about Might Gain back in 2014, but for those who are newer around here, let me revisit some details. The Brave series is what replaced the Transformers franchise when the last of Japan's G1 Transformers series, Victory, ended. The franchise features humans and sentient robots, or in the case of the series Dagwon and to a lesser extent Gao Gaigar, humans physically fusing with giant robots, with them fighting for great justice against the forces of evil. Sunrise was the main developer of the Brave series anime entries, and they were actively in arguments with Takara about the show's development and direction the entire time the franchise was on the air.
See, Takara wants, with any series they sponsor the production of, a mindless, brainless toy advertisement to sell their merch, not caring for the longevity of any of their products beyond the end of their sale on store shelves. But Sunrise, because they actually have a dedication to quality, as long as one of their producer-writers isn't being awful, and understand the longevity of impact their properties can have on fans of that kind of quality, kept insisting to Takara that a good show and a good story that can stand on its own regardless of the merch made for it is actually better advertisement for said merch than doing nothing but caring for the toy sales themselves. Takara, like a lot of companies out there, and even people who defend these decisions, did not listen, and forced their mandates down their throats about what they could do, and their actions almost destroyed the Brave series mid-production while blaming Sunrise for it. And had they gone their way, less than half of the Brave series made would never have actually been produced. This is actually where Mike Gein comes into the picture.
As what Sunrise did with Mike Gein, because of all this frustration, is they gave the show Takara wanted, a mindless, aimless show that was nothing but a toy advertisement on the surface, but they did it their way, as a pseudo-parody of that kind of idiocy that in the background was tying it all together into a longer, subtextual, serialized story arc. The villains of the series actually becoming a farcical take on toxic capitalism's short-sighted business nonsense that only cares for a short-term game and mindless distractions, and has always resulted in a loss of market for a product. Also known as why Takara is in so bad shape these days.
As a result, Takara hated Mike Gein, hated what Sunrise was doing in defiance of them, at least from the version of the story I had been told. Audiences, however, absolutely loved it, because Mike Gein was written smart once he realized what the joke was. According to Sunrise's producers, the series theme was in the most literal sense justice, because it proved their argument more firmly than anything. And even today, Mike Gein is second only to the King of the Braves Gao Gaigar in its rapid popularity. And the only reason Gao Gaigar is held in higher regard was because it was made after Takara announced they were canceling the Brave series after one last entry, so Sunrise was allowed to go all out and do what they wanted, making a series that was truly directed at all audiences and was more popular with teens and adults than it was little kids, to the point fans of it dwarfed the entire rest of the Brave series combined. Bandai eventually bought out the Brave series from Takara, and has ever since made new figures of the mecha from those series, and they sell out every time they do. Bandai has to date made more from the Brave series by marketing it to everyone than Takara ever did with their attempt at demographic pandering.
And of course, because this was a Takara series, Maito has assistant robots in this, in the form of the Bomber and Diver robot teams, which also take center stage to face off against these forces. And as the brave hero in a Sentai-styled series, there's all the expected pontification about justice and saving the world from the sins of people with malice. And it is as cheesy and glorious in the best of ways that just puts a smile on your face and endeavors to inspire people to be better than they are. From seeing the battle AIs in action, this is where Sochi makes the connection to Nine's new body, with her explaining back at the Brave Express Corps base that in the week she and the Vangray were absent, she couldn't find them, so stole materials from a research facility to build her current form to infiltrate among the civilian population to do it that way instead. Nine's current body acts as a remote terminal and backup in the event the Vangray would be damaged beyond repair, and this way, she can do her job better in actually coming to understand humanity. Helped immensely in this task by the similar emotional developments of the Brave Express Corps robots, whose own AI systems, while programmed to protect life, have their own bits and pieces of nuance, emotion, and differing character, which helps them find value in doing their job and how to judge what the right thing to do in a situation is without freezing up.
Basically, you can't break them with logical paradoxes or ask them to calculate pi to infinity, as they can just choose not to. True sentience, after all, isn't just the ability to think, but to choose.
The cooperation of the Brave Express Corps and their facilities additionally opens up the factory in the between the chapter menus, allowing you to spend all the tack points you've been collecting in the ways I've described earlier, and also in other ways as well. After every stage, you can assign units to do special tasks that can gain them experience or currency, and as you progress through the game, the units you use can become flagged as ace pilots and grade aces by defeating enemy units, unlocking an additional skill for their respective units, but also a cutscene with 9 as the combat data gathered in the battles leads to her own greater understanding of people, with her then cornering the involved for a more private interview, her respective observations of their actions leaving her with questions along one theme she can't help but ask each and every one of them when she can. But as is the coincidental comedy of the game, she never quite gets the question she truly wants answered, as it's not one that can so simply be given. 9 also confirms that the Yamato and the rest of the crew have safely made it to this world, but the reason why no word's been circulated about it is all the news networks that disseminate information to the masses are under government control.
An aspect of the Gundam Seed, 00 and Nadesico stories that's unfortunately forgotten in the discussion of them, and a factor in why their stories ended up with the antagonism they did, as it required rogue broadcasts to get the truth out. Something that isn't quite possible when the Earth's government is in control of an AI that was specifically designed to analyze and control the flow of information, such as the celestial being AI, Veda.
And the fact the world nations are all secretly puppet governments for a group known as the Founding Nations on a hidden continent in the Pacific, who isolate themselves from the rest of the world on purpose like elitist snobs. Hell, their information control has more than once come back to bite them, such as what happened with the Jovian Federation being banished to the outer rings of the system, similar to the Jupiter Empire.
Long story, but basically they just have to sit and wait for info.
So Soji goes out with Maito to assist him on his own errands. Maito is the down-to-earth sort despite being a CEO, which lets him run into Sally again.
Yeah, I'm going to skip a bunch of these going forward, but basically Sally has the bad luck of taking part-time gigs that almost always result in her ending up in a crisis that Maito saves her from. She's not always a damsel in distress, just as often she's simply a bystander near the conflict of the week, but it's actually a seeded, serialized arc of a red string of fate tying Maito and Sally together, until they start dating, and eventually marry in the series finale. They are adorable together and a highlight of the series, and Super Robot Wars V seeds much of the same arc in honor and respect of its important role to Maito's own story, with her eventually joining the Yamato Alliance as a support crew member to be close to him.
As they're searching for flowers to help cheer Chitose up, Sally takes them to her own private garden she developed for a shop, only to run into the forces of the Martian Successors, an offshoot terrorist cell that broke off from the Jovian Federation government, who are trying to track down people who are classified as Class A jumpers, and think Soji might be one of them.
Class A jumpers are a plot point from Martian Successor Nadesico. They are individuals who have the biological ability to both survive instantaneous travel across space and time without external factors, the process referred to as boson jumping, and also the mental abilities that allow them to subconsciously calculate higher dimensional spaces that would stabilize such transit for other people, who would otherwise just die for being part of a boson jump. The reason the successors want the jumpers is to, in turn, control for themselves the ability to freely boson jump their forces across space and time.
Boson jumping is actually all tied to a precursor race artifact found on Mars that made such instantaneous travel possible by taking the heaviest weight of calculation off of jumpers' hands, but instead allowing them to remote access it through quantum communication, in the 80 dimensions continuity, that being along the same lines of classification that permit people natural abilities with quantum brainwaves like Setsuna's. The most famous discovered jumpers being Akito Tenkawa and his love interest Yurika Misumaru, with by coincidence, the former of which showing up.
And this is probably a good time for me to explain the Nadesico backstory. Martian Successor Nadesico is another Studio Xebec anime, the 1996 series being a pseudo-serious parody/satire of earlier Super Robot works, with the private military group Nurgle facing off against the forces of Jupiter colonists that the Earth government in the past attempted to exterminate when they originally inhabited the moon before being thrown off of it and forced out to Jupiter, only for it to blow up in their faces when they came back for justice.
Their series ended with the crew of the Nadesico disabling the precursor race artifact on Mars, that prevented the boson jumping events from working, which the Jovian Federation had been using to stage all of their attacks, and such forced the two sides to actually talk out their issues, in the same way Gundam 00 and Gundam Seed also had their stories revolve around forcing disparate sides to talk their issues out by intervening in their conflicts, or confront more malicious elements of the sides that are causing all this conflict to de-escalate things from the world-ending or world-enslaving calamities that were their own focuses.
Nadeshiko, the title of the series, comes from the phrase Yamato Nadeshiko, a reference to the characterization of the lead woman of the series, and also to get a tongue-in-cheek reference to space battleship Yamato in there, among everything else. And it's one of those weird series that actually has a lot of cultural influence due to what it did, and yet hasn't seen a lot of recurrent spotlights, mainly because of its post-series movie, Prince of Darkness, being a complete waste of time. Spoilers, the story that Super Robot Wars games love to use is the Prince of Darkness storyline. So why was it relevant? Well, it's part of an important group of series from 1995, 6, and 7 that actually served to revitalize interest in the super robot genre, which had waned in prior years thanks to the disaster that is Victory Gundam, and also Takara's mistreatment of the Brave series and other works at the time just being dull and repetitive. Other frequently spotlighted series in this that helped improve matters being Neon Genesis Evangelion and King of Braves Gao Gaigar.
Evangelion is long hailed as the deconstruction of the mythos around Giant Robot series, with them shoving a teenager with their own personal issues into a pilot role, and trying to play out a scenario where a kid forced to save the world he doesn't really want anything to do with would be like as he struggles with that burden. Gao Gaigar and Nadeshiko, however, are a reconstruction of the mecha genre, and a seriously toned parody in their own respective rights.
The three series together, and likewise helped by Macross 7 and Plus, and the Gundam series Wing and X, helped to renew interest in the mecha genre because they all took new, refreshing looks at the subject matter in divergent ways distinct from others of their expected types that had been heavily retread ground. The given three being due to their own unique strengths, the power of psychological impact, the nature of true serialization adding strength to a story, and the silly things in series that we all just love as they wouldn't be the same without them. The irony is, Evangelion over time has gotten the most spotlight of these series, and yet it is the series that actually is the least deserving of the accolades. Quite overblown, in fact. As Evangelion has far more story problems than either Gao Gaigar or Nadeshiko. The chief reason being it is a super robot take on the real robot side of the genre, while Gao Gaigar and Nadeshiko invert that, and have their super robot influences being subsumed in the more serious natures of the real robot subject matter and story engine. Thus, while they're more visibly one type over the other, there is a greater amalgamated influence in how they execute their stories. Gao Gaigar in specific being a super robot series that 100% operates under real robot rules, while Nadeshiko is more about playing with the tropes and influence of super robots while they themselves are in a real robot setting. The other 3 or 4? Well, Macross 7 took mecha piloting to an entirely distinct tier with its idol collaboration, Plus is its own thing entirely within that subsect. Wing, I'll address another time, and Gundam X on its own doing its best to subvert the expectations and desires of Tomino's Gundam series, and doing it well because it knew what to be subversive about. It's just the show's producer, Atsushi Kaiji, did a lot to screw that series over until he was fired 26 episodes into it, as the man also did on a lot of other series he worked on, which includes other shows that were treated extremely poorly despite the merits to them. Speaking of, go watch Gundam X!
拒絶した人もいるようだけど。
ええ、真実よりも戦争を求めているんです。
戦争か。よくも飽きずに続けるものだ。みんなそれぞれにニュータイプという言葉を捉えている。そしてそれがまた次の戦争の引き金となろうとしている。でもそれはある意味では仕方がないことかもしれない。僕らはニュータイプという幻想でつながった世代なのだから、人を超えた力と人の革新とは別のことなんだ。けれどもそれにとらわれてしまった人々はその次を求めてしまった。
ニュータイプは未来を作らないのか。
そうだ。それと同時に過去にしがみつきそれを利用することしか考えなかったものにも未来は作れない。
The reason for Nadeshiko's remembrance as opposed to the others is it is a series that asks the question, What if a Super Robot TV show was co-opted by a bunch of assholes who made a cult which worshipped it, and then sent them all out on a vengeance quest against the government that tried to exterminate and cover up its crimes? The result is the aforementioned Jovian Federation, which had a bone to pick with the Earth government and are excusing their actions as they believe this is the justice they have been denied, despite information suppression making it so that no one on Earth actually knows what was done to them. That's the nature of the threat in Nadesico. Illogical fanaticism versus governmental apathy, which the crew of said ship also share in the former's case. Seriously, its ace pilot is a cook, its commander is a complete ditz, several of the supporting crew are pervs, or just as obsessed with the same TV show as their enemies. The place is a complete madhouse, and yet it works well for both drama and comedy as the story develops itself.
Idiots.
I once called this series decidedly mixed when I discussed the works of its head writer, Sho Aikawa, in passing as part of my Kamen Rider Blade review years ago. And I now see why in retrospect I was wrong. If you were one who called me out on that back then for that, I apologize, you were right to do so. I originally saw Nadesico when I was very new to Super Robot stuff beyond Transformers, Power Rangers adaptations, or Toonami's run of Gundam. But now, with me seeing more older mecha series and knowing more about the genre, well, when I revisited it, I liked it a lot more than I did when I was younger. Primarily because now I am in on its joke and central commentary, which makes the story finally click with me. It's one of those shows where the more you know about what the joke is, the more you appreciate it. Unlike some other series that bastardize predecessors to promote themselves instead of respecting them. Then the Prince of Darkness happens. Prince of Darkness was not written by Sho Aikawa. It is a selfish, shameless, and time-wasting self-promotion of the series director Tatsuo Sato, trying to take credit for the entire show of Aikawa's by writing an addition to it himself that overrides the prior fun of it. And spoilers on that, he unfortunately succeeded, even though the movie he made to get that credit sucks. It sucks so hard. While the movie is technically a sequel to a game tie-in to the series, it basically has nothing to do with that game, and its critical failing is it spends over 90% of its runtime trying to put the crew back together and on random distractions that do nothing for the story or fit the show's comedy, as the movie is not funny, instead of it directing any tangible focus on time of the actual threats and what would be the emotional core of the film. By the time they're actually ready to fight the actual enemy they built up at the beginning to get the crew back together, the movie's over. And the only resolution to the entire conflict we get is a completely unsatisfying curb stomp that makes it seem like the reunion the entire movie wasted our time on was pointless from the start.
So what happened between the end of the series and the movie? Akito and Yurika got married, and then they were summarily murdered. It in actuality being attacked by the successors trying to claim them and used for reactivating the boson jump artifact. Akito survived the attack, but much of his body had to be replaced by cybernetics. The surgery is robbing him of his ability to taste anything, which is devastating for one who wants to live their life as a chef. Between that and the loss of his wife, he's a shell of a man, only living to make the ones who took her from him pay. And that would be the successors and their elite Hokushin unit.
Spoilers for the ending, Hokushin goes down like a bitch.
So Akito scares off Hokushin's underlings, warning us about the whole jumper thing before taking off himself. The damaged man managing to tag Hokushin's men, so Soji and the others can go break into their hideout, with Akito helping out in his unit, the Black Selena.
The Black Selena is actually a pretty powerful unit throughout the game. It has very high movement speed, is heavily armored, does decent damage, and as it's based on Nadesico tech, it has a distortion field ability that both gives it special defenses normal weapons can't touch, and makes it super effective against other Nadesico-classed units, as the respective distortion fields of the units negate each other. Powerful units like the Quantao, Vilkis, Getters, Mazgar, and Strike Freedom can pierce those types of distortion fields, but it's the Nadesico units that can do it by default.
And this is also where the other Nadesico units of the game get introduced, with them coming in to counter renewed Jovian aggression. Introducing the Nadesico B, as the Nadesico A was destroyed in the main series, commanded by the Electron Fairy Ruri Hoshino.
Fun fact I've mentioned before, Akito and Ruri's Japanese voice actors got married after work on Nadesico introduced them, and they actually love coming back to reprise the roles.
And the Super Ace Develos units, piloted by series regular Ryoko Subaru, who had dyed green hair in the series, and new character from the film, Saburoto Takasugi, who is basically without a character beyond being a flirting man-whore. The other pilots from the original crew, Izumi Maki and Hikaru Amano, haven't been re-recruited to the task force yet, but only actually appear as part of one of Ryoko's attacks, despite the three of them and Akito being the four-man main pilot team of the series.
Several characters with team attacks end up having their roles folded into specials for only one character, though. The game cast is crowded enough as it is that it can't accommodate all of them.
Though despite devastating the successor's assault, Akito breaks off from them on his own, briefly encountering Hokushin, who does nothing but taunt him before jumping away. Akito following after his tormentor, which leads everyone to the successors assaulting the space colony Shirahime, a nexus of humanity's own research into FTL technologies, where they have also captured the Yamato. The Earth Federation forces are in no shape to take on such an assault. Between the war with the plants, the armed interventions of celestial being facing the outlaws, and the previous Jovian conflict, along with the elimination of most of their arms merchants, the AD Earth government hasn't rebuilt anywhere near the forces that would allow them the spare units to face the successor's actions, which is where the Nadesico unit comes in. But that disillusionment with military power is actually where the successors come in. It's taken in many of those defectors from both camps, in a hope that a show of force will bring them back to power, even though it won't. But, if they want some backup, there is someone Ruri wants to contact first. Celestial Being, which Shoji knows about thanks to a movie he watched.
Did you see the compilation movies, or...
Because we are celestial beings! Riser sword!
Oh right, that propaganda piece.
In actuality, Setsuna and Tieria never let them know of their organization alignment earlier, thus doesn't know they're the Gundam Meisters of Celestial Being in all this, requiring Ruri to give them a brief history lesson about how all the events of this universe went down, to better help organize the merged stories for those who actually know of each of the involved series, alongside their respective involved parties.
It's again why these games are actually so good. They know there are fans who either might not know all the details of all the series coming in, or care enough about their respective lores to want to know how they all have been fit together. So these lore primer sections are extremely helpful.
But before we can get to that, two more of Maito's antagonists, the petty thief Catherine Vuitton and her cat girls, yes, seriously, go about stealing some valuables, while the Chinese chef with his own goals of world domination, Hoi Ko Lo, is ordered to help her out of Maito's counterattack on her by their mutual benefactor.
Yeah, the majority of Maito's rogues gallery are collectively supplied by a man named Exev, who provides text to those with malice in their hearts to sow chaos and weave a narrative of events that his own boss profits off of. Again, details about Might Guy that inform how heavily they were satirizing Takara being the metafictional antagonists of the Brave series.
And on top of them, the successors also want a piece of the action to preemptively strike down the Nadesico, only for them to in turn suffer setbacks from an armed intervention.
Gundam Zabanya, lock on Stratus, targeted and firing!
Gundam Harut, Alleluia Haptism, Soma Pyrrhus, commencing interception operation.
Toby is with them, having managed to meet up with Setsuna and Tieria after they got warped back here. The Ptolemy, I'm going to go with Ptolemy, I have difficulty saying Ptolemios, being contacted directly for assistance due to Ruri having a prior contact with Veda during the 80 Dimensions battles. With these units and also the Ptolemy's own advantages of being a battleship that can attack in the same turn after it moves with your permitted use of Trans-Am, there's not a unit on the board tough enough to take us down, especially with all four of the Celestial Being units bearing remote weapon armaments and super soldiers.
Speaking of, why the hell has the Zabanya Gundam not received a 1/100 scale model yet, as either a no grade or a master grade? Like, between shield and rifle bits, there are some crazy insane displays you could make with that damn thing.
準備はいいかハロー
乱れ打って乱れ打って
くたばりやがれ
With the forces retreating, Celestial Being is offered a chance to join the Nadesico's Autonomous Task Force, an effort that the Ptolemy captain Tsumaraki Lee Noriega actually agrees to. Celestial Being has lost all of their financial backers, the last one being killed in the series, and the Peacekeeping Force is now serving the same role Celestial Being did in stopping aggressors on any side, and it's being run by people they trust to not go mad with power. Plus, the rest of the Ptolemy's crew has been updated on the whole Yamato situation, and they want to help out with that as well, in part from how Tobia came into their care, which is the subject of the next DLC mission which cuts back to that, and Tobia being present to Alleluia Haptism and Marie Parfarsi returning to Celestial Being on their own. A year before, they left the organization to try and find themselves, separate from their prior lives as experimented upon super soldiers conscripted into fighting, and despite them ending up on opposite sides during the series, finding each other again. Ultimately, their story just has them knowing that as long as they're together, anywhere they are can be their paradise. Thus, if they have to fight to preserve their paradise, then so be it. The rest of this bonus mission is the Gundamizers more thoroughly field testing their new units against the Outlaw Remnants, only to be ambushed by other Federation forces, Toby assisting in the resulting counteroffensive, and learning about the familiar camaraderie that, honestly, makes him feel just at home as if he were back with the Crossbone Vanguard. The second DLC mission set between the next events focuses instead on Ruri's side of things, her enlistment with the Earth Forces after the death of Akito and Yurika, who she considered her own family as, like Alleluia and Marie, she herself was born to be developed as a super soldier, but more of a data analyst type. Seriously, the episodes around her backstory are emotionally devastating, and I highly recommend them. There's a reason she became so attached to Akito and Yurika, after all, as they're among the few people to view her as an actual person and not as a tool. The one assigning her to head this unit is likewise someone she knows well, Koichiro Misumaru, Yurika's father, who was likewise devastated by his daughter's death, and they are ordered on their first anti-successor strike, with them backed up by... Wait, who's this guy?
You bastard! You don't get it, do you? I'm special! I got 2,000! Give these monk battle!
Oh right, the 00 series butt monkey that actually managed to get his love interest at the end. I kind of forgot he was a thing, as he gets superseded in focus by Graham Aker and Louise Hallaby.
Regardless, in this engagement, Patrick defends the Nadesico B from an attack by Hokushin, shredding his GNX-4, but him somehow making it out alive. Patrick Colasor is a complete doofus, but like a cockroach, it is impossible to kill him, which his wife, General Katie Monaghan, is eternally thankful for. But getting back to the present, well, another distraction to confronting the Martian successors and getting back the Yamato has shoved itself into the foreground, as a report has made it out of the isolated founding nations of the world of one of their crown princesses being something called a Norma.
And very few in my audience, at least those who don't follow me on Twitter, which makes up like 90% of my subscribers, have any idea what I or the game is talking about, because of it being a series that has not gotten that much attention. I will explain next time. It ties very deeply into the story.
As first, the combined Nadesico Celestial Being Alliance wants to rendezvous with more of their allies in the independent nation of Orb. The ships deciding to detour near the founding nations, where on top of being attacked by forces that guard the founding nation's borders, another ship ends up being pulled through a spatial warp, caused by the emergence of freaking dragons onto this plane of reality. The ship is the Mithril Mercenary Organization's flagship, the Tuatha De Danann, from the series Full Metal Panic. Its commanding officer, Talitha Tessarosa, being another that offers assistance in the active fight they found themselves in exchange for help getting home. With their mobile strike team, headed by Full Metal Panic's protagonist Sosuke Sagara, is Hathaway Noah, son of Captain Bright Noah, piloting the Z Gundam he is known for using in the Gundam novel and upcoming/recent movie, Hathaway's Flash.
This game is not adapting Hathaway's Flash, by the way, merely tying elements of it into the Third World story, which we haven't been to yet, which is coming later. As for Full Metal Panic,
Full Metal Panic is the story of Sosuke Sagara, a boy who grew up living, surviving, and thriving in war, going from battlefield to battlefield, and eventually finding himself working alongside the paramilitary peacekeeper mercenary force Mithril. In service to them, he pilots small mecha called arm slaves that are created from the mining of technology from the minds of Whispered, individuals who can psychically access black box technology with a mysterious origin, and fights against others trying to abuse that same black box technology. His newest duty in his career being the undercover protection of a newer discovered Whispered, Kaname Chidori, who is otherwise a normal high school girl. As most Whispered are super geniuses due to the subconscious flowing of information into their heads, Kaname quickly uncovers his identity, and thus got suckered into the insanity of his life, as there is literally no off-switch to Sosuke being a soldier. He doesn't know anything else, which causes all kinds of problems as he goes too far in applying military solutions to mundane problems. Even as Kaname's awakening state as a Whispered more and more makes her a target for those wanting to abuse her abilities. And she in turn is drawn into his military life, while he in turn finds himself for the first time grounded by normalcy thanks to Kaname. The supporting cast involves elements of both sides, from Kaname and Sosuke's classmates to the other forces of Mithril, the serious big sis type Mao, the flirty sniper Kurtz, Clauseau, who's just there and doesn't really do much, the aforementioned Tessa, who is a hyper-competent captain, and who is also majorly crushing on Sosuke Bosuke to the survivor's obliviousness. And of course, I, the artificial intelligence of Sosuke's arm slave, that operates the black box tech of his mech, the Lambda driver, that turns will into a dimension-distorting strength, but which Sosuke can't understand, nor can he fully utilize the system, as the way his life is gone, it takes him a long time, thanks primarily to Kaname, for him to understand his own worth beyond being a soldier, and actually gain a will of his own, as he finds himself falling in love with Kaname, and she too getting mutual feelings for him.
Full Metal Panic is difficult to discuss for many fans of it, in part due to the long pauses in its adaptation, whose first anime season was made in 2002 and adapted the first 3 novels. The filler season Fumofu was made in 2003, and third season adapting novels 4 and 5 was in 2005. The light novels for the series have been done since 2010, but the 4th season for it, Invisible Victory, that adapts volumes 7 through 9, which also included a audio drama that adapted volume 6, was only made in 2018 by Studio Xebec, and it was an adaptation cut short from actually doing the final 3 novels because of financial shortfalls. Which is frustrating for many, because the author for the light novels himself, Shinji Goto, loves his fans, and even scripted Invisible Victory because he does want the adaptation to be completed, unlike so many light novel adaptations that are never completed after a partial adaptation as they wait too long to do the next part of it, when the series is already long over. A certain Magical Index fans can definitely relate.
Now, of the series shoved in that actually is relevant to the story, unlike a number of series here which are not, Full Metal Panic is arguably the worst adapted, as there is not easy room to adapt its true story, as most of the antagonists of Full Metal Panic die not long into their encounters with Sagara, and thus it should be one-and-done fights with most of them instead of the recurrence that's done. There isn't the proper space to utilize them as other properties are, and as a result, a lot of the story with them is not as strong as it should be. And this kind of starts here, with the Full Metal Panic gang just here as a means to get Hathaway here. Hell, there's a DLC mission that involves them actually acting as support in the testing of Hathaway's Z Gundam and his Minovsky drive out against some insurgents that happens not long before they're sucked over here. It's a really short mission, so there's not much point in giving it heavy recap, but it kind of reinforces my point that, thanks to an event I'll recap next time, they got screwed out of focus and time spent on them that should have been theirs and would have validated them showing up here and starting their support against this dragon threat. However, these forces are not the principal fighters that face the dragons. The ones who come to deal with that are the forces of the organization Arsenal and their mobile weapons, the Paramales, which are used to counter the dragon threat on behalf of the founding nations, though their soldiers are regrettably conscripted into this fight for reasons outside of their control, with them then asking the various forces out here to detour to their own island to explain.
That, in and of itself, is a long story. Best explained next time. Prepare for a lot of exposition next time.
In a hidden section of the world, amidst the land of magic users, a young woman is torn from the safety of her home and family, thrust hopelessly into a secret war where she must survive the onslaught of dragons. Desperate to live on and defy the fate she has been handed, her rage gives birth to a power forgotten at time. Alongside that of the mechanical dragon, she rides into battle. And wait, what's Arthur and Zala doing here? Next time on Super Robot Wars V, The Symphony of Fallen Angels.